Ho, 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 ho. Ladies, gentlemen, gamers, and fellow Valve lovers, welcome back once again to another video we haven't done too recently, at least, and that is a review of not a show, because I'm currently watching the longest shows ever, One Piece and Suits, but a game! Wow! So what are we here for? So, I recently played Deadlock, and I'm here to give my opinions on it. As a long-time MOBA player, because obviously I've played Smite way back in the day, I actually started playing Smite in middle school, and I liked that a lot because I could fly as Apollo, and then from there my friends got me onto the dreaded League of Legends, and then from there, basically after 3 attempts of trying to play it, it finally stuck, although not really much anymore because I'm an event enjoyer now. I'm a very casual Andy, and that's going to be a little bit of a theme of this video, but after League of Legends, I kind of branched out a little bit. I've touched on Dota, but not much, which is ironically enough another thing from Valve as well. Aside from Dota, I've played Heroes of the Storm, and then aside from that, I've played God knows whatever else, because all of these things pop up and then they go away. Predecessor, I've tried. Basically, I'm very well versed with MOBAs. So, Deadlock is Valve's newest game. Now, it's very, very early access. Now, I'm really scared to sort of give my review as it is, where it is now, because one, the game is very early, and two, I don't want to be mistaken as IGN, because IGN's reviews, I mean, just look at Concord, are not really that good. So, with those caveats going forward, and with the theme of I'm a casual-ish gamer, at least for right now, despite being Unreal in Fortnite, we're going to move forward. So, Deadlock is a MOBA. It's third person, and it's basically a mix between Smite and I would say Dota 2. Now, I'm not really that well versed in Dota 2, I will be honest. I have tried it. I've played maybe like 10 games maximum of it in my life through various times. But Dota 2 is really signified in the tier list of MOBAs as probably one of the most difficult ones. I would say at the easiest, it's Heroes of the Storm. At the hardest, it's Dota 2, and then everything else is in between. League is kind of the middle ground. Valve, as much as they hate the number 3, do end up making games, just not going to 3. And they made Deadlock as, I guess, a competitor in the space. Now, it's really weird to me because Valve already has Dota 2. It's not like they don't have a MOBA. And Dota 2, like I said, is probably the hardest thing out there that there is. So there's a little bit of nuance, and the biggest complaint that I personally had, and the biggest complaint that I hear people have, aside from the horrible onboarding process of new players, because let's be real, new players in MOBAs are basically just chumming the water for the sharks. The biggest problem is the camera. A lot of people don't like top-down, and I didn't either, and that's why it took me a lot of time to get into League of Legends, finally. Again, it took me 3 tries over a couple months. So, Deadlock is kind of their answer to that, I guess, because it's third person. Again, it's really much like Smite. It gives me Smite vibes, but it's more FPS than anything. I would count it as a MOBA shooter. Now, because it's Valve, it obviously has a big influx of traction, support, views, just in general. I mean, on Twitch, this thing alone is sometimes dominating the play space when certain people are on it. And I don't think they're getting paid to be on it either. I think they're just playing it because it's fun. So, aside from that, what do I think of the actual game? I've pretty much at this point, and I've been kind of waiting on this part too, I've played every single character in the game, some of them multiple times, obviously, and there's a roster of like, I don't know, loosely speaking, maybe about like 20 around there. There's definitely not a lacking of characters, and the biggest best thing about Deadlock right now is that it is a closed test. It is technically, I guess, a beta, but if you're in, you can get other people in. All you have to do is invite them, and then I guess on a rolling basis, they will be let in. Someone invited me, one of my friends, Daniel, invited me, thank you to Daniel, and I got in the very next day. So they're getting it in waves, and it's basically like a virus. You have to look at your friends, you have to kiss them and give them gonorrhea, and then they have to spread it. So that's basically how you get into Deadlock. So you can't just try it if you want, you gotta know someone. And there's no lack of people online who are giving access, some free, some not. If you pay for this shit, I think you're a sucker, but regardless. To get in is not very easy, but it's also not very hard either. So once you're in, what are you greeted with? Well, I would like to say the first and foremost thing, if you don't play MOBAs, ironically enough, I think they have a pretty good onboarding process. the tutorial, how they explain things, it's very nice. But the biggest thing is, right, aside from the tutorial, when you're playing the actual game, the game is rough. Like, a lot of assets are missing, and they don't try and hide this either. They tell you straight up, this game is early, and that's fine. Because the biggest thing with this game is it's fun. But there's some caveats here. This isn't going to be all happy and sunshine and rainbows. There's going to be some doom and gloom as well. So aside from having a actually pretty surprisingly decent tutorial, one thing that you will first notice is, again, a lot of missing assets. And not missing assets, I would say placeholder. The minions are literally candles, right? Hopefully in the background of this I have some Deadlock gameplay where you can see it, but the minions are candles, and then the towers are people with fires for heads, and they just zap you. So it's not terrible, it's workable, but these are things that are only going to get better, and that's a negative and a positive, because again, I'm kind of reviewing this in beta. So it's a negative for now because there's not really a coherent theme, and the theme itself of the game, it really does look like they took characters and models from Dota 2. Like, it does legitimately look like a Valve game if you look at it long enough. Now granted, it's the most modern one, right? It looks good, it looks pretty decent, but if you look at it for long enough, you could tell this is kind of like where Valve's graphics are. And it's not really intensive on the computer or anything. You could run this pretty much at max settings. My old as fuck PC, same as me, can pretty much run it maxed, no issue. So at the end of the day, it's a nice Valve game. But some of the characters, ironically enough, you could kind of tell with the style that they look Valve. For instance, there's a character called, oh god, what the fuck is his name? Shiv? The naming conventions are kind of similar to Dota 2 as well. In Dota 2, I don't like the way they named them. Like, one of the characters' name is literally Sniper. Oh, I wonder what he does. Another character's name is Berserker. Oh, I wonder what he does. Now, they don't go with that naming convention always, but it is prevalent. And here it's a little bit better. Here we have characters like Vindicta, Haze, Infernus, Kelvin. And some of them are a play on words, right? Like Kelvin has to do with ice, Infernus has to do with fire. So it's not wholly creative, but it's way better than Dota 2's, which is good. But I believe Shiv is the bleed guy, and he looks straight out of TF2. Excuse me. Like, I'll be honest, he looks straight up out of TF2, and that's not a bad thing because it's in modern era. But TF2, they all share pretty much the same face, so it's not really saying much. But regardless, the graphics are decent. It's old-timey New York. It does take place in New York, the Big Bad Apple, where I'm located at, sadly. But, it's in New York, but it's very, like, I don't want to say Victorian era, because I really don't know what that means. But it's kind of like old-timey New York when you can imagine, like, horse-drawn carriages going around. And the game is decently, I don't want to say drab, but kind of grayscaled. It's not a vibrant game. It's not a game that'll pop. And the more I look at it, the more I was like, okay, you know, I got used to it. The colors are a little gray, but it's nothing terribly boring. It's nothing terribly drab, which is honestly fine. Regardless, actual gameplay, the thing we're all here to probably talk about and what I really feel of it. The matchmaking is a little wonky. Now, there's some games where I'm getting absolutely stomped. There's some games where I'm just absolutely stomping. And in the background, hopefully I'll selectively choose the stomping ones. But the gameplay itself, just off-rip, is pretty fun. But again, the big caveat here, and this is where this is a potential negative, this game, and this is just the nature of games in general, but I feel like it's really accentuated in MOBAs, because any MOBA you play, aside from Heroes of the Storm, and even in Heroes of the Storm to an extent, you need to know information. And you don't get this information unless you're very well versed on the game beforehand, and you go into it knowing a lot from watching videos, or you play out the games. You do the legwork, you get experience. This game is fun, but again, I'm playing the beta where no one really knows what's going on. A lot of people are new, a lot of people are trying to get in. As the game evolves, not only will the graphics improve and placeholder assets will be gone, but the game will get harder. Character complexity is a mixed barrel in here. There are some characters, and they do show them with you, right? And again, for an early access game, they seem to have a lot of stuff down. Like, they have lore in the game, they have abilities, they have the kits, they have working menus. Like, it's a Valve game. Valve is a rich company. The game is in beta, but it's not really a play it's like a pre-playtest. Because up until now, until release, whenever it releases, the game's going to be permanently on. You can play it whenever you want. And they used to have queues for matchmaking, like, oh, you can only matchmake between 12 and 6, or 5 and 4, right, from AM to PM. They got rid of that because now they have enough players, because, again, people are slowly coming in. And I think that's a really smart way business-wise to do it. But regardless, back to the gameplay. The characters are a mixed barrel. They do show some characters that are good for beginners. Now, whether I agree with some of that or not, that's, we'll see about that. But a lot of the characters are pretty beginner friendly. There's not too much complexity in a lot of them, although there is in some. And the best way I could describe it is it's easy to pick up, hard to master, but not so easy to pick up, and I'll explain why. A lot of the characters are decently simple. Again, after you read their kits, you pretty much know what they're going to do, and there's not like there's branching paths, right? Now, there's obviously items, there's lanes, there's a loose sort of jungle, which is interesting, because this isn't like your average MOBA. It is, but it isn't. There's some stuff that sets it apart, which I think is cool. There's a whole sprint system too, because obviously it's an FPS, it's a shooter. There's a sprint system, there's an aiming system. Some people can aim in, some people can't, some people have an alternate fire. But at the end of the day, everyone has a gun and you're shooting it. Now, depending on which person you are, you get a different gun. Some of them feel better, some of them feel worse. Obviously, some people are long range, some people are short. But in general, if you have good aiming skills, you probably will highly succeed in this game. Now, again, in the beta, I don't know if I'm going up against a noob or a really good person because the matchmaking is iffy because it's a beta, right? Not many people are in yet. In the beginning, I was absolutely stomping because I have knowledge about MOBAs. Afterward, though, the game gets pretty decently complex. The items aren't too bad. There's passives, there's actives. One thing that's very unique, though, is they split the items into 3 separate categories. There's yellow, green, and purple. Purple, you could take it as like ability power because it boosts your abilities. Green, you could take as health, it boosts your health or defenses. And then yellow, you could take as your actual auto fire weapon, the thing you're left clicking, or I don't know what it is on console, right trigger, I guess. The thing you're actually shooting that you always have ammo for, right? That's not really on a cooldown besides reloading. Now, the best thing is you can get 4 items in each of these slots, right? And they do different things. Now, again, maybe these are placeholder names, maybe not, but the menu is a little rough for that. It's workable, but I hope they do something better because there's components for items that build into better items. And the way they're laid out, they kind of show you which one is which, but it was a little hard to see at first. They did update it after a while to make it, I think, a little bit more obvious. But even the names of the items, the purple item, cooldown, I wonder what it does. And then it builds into improved cooldown. And then it goes into superior cooldown. And there's different tiers and costs of items. Again, it's your classic MOBA, item shop. But one thing that's great is there's different classes of these items, like I said, yellow, green, and purple. And you can buy each of them, you could buy 4 of them independently of the other. So realistically speaking, you could have 12 items. But that's actually a lie because as you play the game, you can kill the enemy structures, you could kill their towers, their defenders, whatever the fuck it's called, and you actually unlock more item slots, which is really, really fucking cool. And as the game goes on, you feel a sense of progression because you unlock 4 extra slots at max, right? So instead of there being 12 items max, there's 16 maximum that at least I've seen. And these items are really good. There's starter items, there's items you get in the beginning, and they give you a lot of options because there's so many items. And obviously some items are better on some characters than others, but the main gist of it is the item system is really interesting and really cool because just because you get a green item that's for health, that doesn't mean it's only for health. Sometimes you can get a bullet shield, sometimes you can get a magic shield, which blocks you from abilities. Sometimes having these shields gives you damage. Sometimes these items go into each other's niches, and I think that's really cool. So even if you're building tank or you're building healthy, you're not necessarily losing out too much in damage. It's just which way do you want to do things. I think the level, and obviously people are going to metagame this, right? People are eventually going to find the most optimal, but I think the level at which you can have choice with the items is really fucking cool. I never felt like in League where I have to build 1 set build or maybe 2 if I'm lucky for this champion, and that's pretty much it. Like you have 1 or 2 flex items depending on how the game goes in League, but for the most part your items are pretty set in stone. I don't think that's the way it is in Deadlock. I could be wrong once they actually figure out the hardcore meta. And the item builders, by the way, you could look up what the most popular builds are and people can vote on it. It's a godsend. It's a big help because there's a lot of items. So it's really good to have. Again, the new player experience isn't as bad as I thought it would be. Excuse me, that's pretty bad. But it's not as bad as I thought. But regardless, the items are good, the characters vary in complexity, and again, the biggest thing, especially with progression, like I said, with the items as the game goes on, is the characters. When you level your characters, you level their abilities, and their abilities sometimes gain very simple things, like just cooldown or extra damage, but other times they get really massive upgrades like, oh, extra stun time. Oh, now it ricochets off things. Now it goes through minions. Now, like, it infinitely stacks, right? Like, these things sometimes, especially for the last tier of upgrade, is really fucking powerful. And if there's one thing I love in a game, it's progression. And Deadlock definitely has that, not only with the items as the game goes on, but also with your literal character. Now, this is where I kind of say it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag because some characters are really simple and their final upgrades are kind of boring. Some characters are really fucking ridiculous though. Like, there's a character called Bebop. He's basically Blitzcrank. He grabs you, he puts a bomb on you, and then he throws you back. And that's his main combo, and it's really fun. And it's obviously, there's some skill involved. It's not easy to hit, but if you hit it, you're rewarded. But he infinitely scales damage, and his max level ultimate heals him for 100% of the damage he does, at least from when I played. It's actually crazy, some of these abilities, and it makes you feel like a power fantasy. Now, later on in the game, this somewhat becomes an issue because I don't know if there's hardcore tanks. Again, I need to play the game a little bit more. Sometimes people felt tanky, but that's because I was behind. But it really feels like later on in the game, people just get shredded and melted. And it's really just a question of who sees who first and who can kind of catch you out and who can aim better. So ultimately, there is some skill in it, but it feels a little bit melty later on. But that's because maybe people don't know what they're doing yet because we're still early in the beta. But regardless, excuse me, the biggest thing I want to say that's a little bit of a concern for the game, because the game is good. I'm just going to come out and say, like, I really am enjoying the game. Obviously, they're going to add progression, they're going to add monetization, they're going to add probably skins and stuff because it's Valve, right? And the biggest hope I have for this game is that I can make money off of it. PUBG and Dota 2, well, PUBG is not really owned by Valve, but PUBG is one of the main games. Counter-Strike and Dota 2, you can make money off these games, mainly Counter-Strike, to be honest. But the fact that they're Valve games and you could sell things on the market because you could get them from in-game, you could make money off these games and you could buy games with them. I hope, and I probably don't doubt that they're going to find a way to monetize this, to integrate it with the Steam Marketplace to where you can start selling shit. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know if they're going to introduce new weapons, new skins, new whatever, right? Because right now the champions are pretty much, I don't want to say set in stone with what they have, but I can't imagine them having new weapons because some of their weapons are very integral to their kit. For instance, in Furnace, right? Unless they sell you a weapon, but at that point it might be pay to play, but unless they sell you a weapon that makes his auto fire into like a shotgun blast or something, his kit kind of revolves around, or at least one of the abilities, his 3, revolves around him shooting you very fast because it takes 10 shots to proc his fire because he's a fire character. So I don't know if they could really sell you new weapons. And in terms of just how I see the game going, I think a lot of things are pretty much set in stone. It's just how are they going to monetize it and how often are they going to add new people. So this is where the slight concern comes up from the gameplay, right? Early game feels really weak, and there's no mana system in this game either. The main gating ability in this game is time. It's cooldown. You can spam your abilities as much as you want as long as they're off cooldown. The only other resource you have to manage aside from cooldown is health. And again, some of these items are really, really interesting because some of them give you extra charges on abilities. This is kind of a double-edged coin here, just switching back times because I forgot to say this one before. With the items and just with the game in general, there's some points where the amount of information they give you, sometimes for a new player could probably be overloading, but it's very appreciated because there's a lot of it. When you scroll over an item, you see exactly how it's going to benefit your character. You can see how much health they give you, how much damage each of your abilities are now going to do, and the items aren't that static too. Some of them give range, some of them give duration, some of them give extra charges to your abilities that actually use charge. So this is where it really shows you, and again, maybe if they just clean it up and do it in a better way, it would be a lot nicer, but they give you a lot of information on what these items will do and how they exactly affect your character with hard numbers. And as a person who loves all the information, I absolutely adore this. This is amazing. On the flip side though, there's other times where they just sometimes don't really tell you a lot of information. There's a lot of stats on the side of the screen, on the bottom left where your core stats are, where sometimes you don't know what these are, and if you scroll over them, sometimes they don't say anything. I'll give you a great example. There's a mid monster in the jungle, and we'll get to the jungle soon, but there's a mid monster that's kind of like Baron Nashor from League. You go, you have to get your team to kill it because you really can't solo it, and then it drops a little buff down that you have to break because the enemy can steal it or you can take it, but if you get it, you get something called a Rejuvenator. Now again, this is Valve, right? There's not much guessing work that needs to be done here. But you really don't get told what this thing does. Does it res you? Does it give you extra regen? Does it improve your move speed, your damage? Who the fuck really knows? Because on one instance with the items, they do an amazing job of telling you all the information that the items give you. On the other instance, sometimes they give you no information at all. But some things you could probably guess, and some things you could tell as the game goes on. Or maybe they're just cleaning stuff up and just haven't added it in yet. Or maybe it's in and I haven't seen it. There could be a lot of different things because it is a beta and I'm stupid. But moving back to the jungle. So this is a 4-lane game. Typically in MOBAs you have 3 lanes. I mean, Heroes of the Storm kind of breaks this, but typically you have 3 lanes. In this you have 4, and there's, I believe, 6 people in the game in total. So there's 2 people in 2 lanes, and then 1 person in each of the remaining 2 lanes. So overall 6. How this does this, I don't know. If you're in a party, usually, if you're just with one other person, you will probably get laning with your friend. Because in the beginning, the game tells you where to go. Like, it kind of forces you, like, okay, this is your lane. There's nothing keeping you there aside from your teammates getting angry at you, but you can always roam, you can always go to another lane, but it's pretty set in stone that there's laning. And there's a jungle too. There's jungle monsters. There's a lot of breakables in the map, and the map is decently big. I don't know if they're only going to have one, but right now the one kind of makes sense and it's pretty good. But there's monsters in the jungle that are more secondary to the game. I feel like they're there for min-maxing because you could do them, and if you do them, you're missing out on laning. But if you do them, you get souls. Souls is basically the main currency. It's used to upgrade your abilities and to buy items, but thankfully that's not a shared resource, it's separate. But excuse me. But essentially, you can go do the jungle monsters, and most of them don't give shit. They just give souls, so you're just doing them for extra money and extra leveling. But there are some things like the soul urn, which just drops down at random points in the map, and you have to bring it from one side to another. So it's not like after laning's over, or if you're not really doing good in lane, or if you're doing too good and you need to go do something else. There is other stuff to do. Not very important, like they don't give you huge buffs, but they just get you more ahead. I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity. They could put more stuff in, but this is going to kind of be a detraction slash a good thing for what I'm going to say later on. But regardless, the jungle definitely feels secondary. There's no jungling person. There is items to help you jungle, but it doesn't feel forced, and it's more there if you're good or if you just have something not to do, right? You don't want to do laning, so I'm just going to do jungle. Aside from that, the Spirit Urn is there, so there is like one little mini game you could play, and there's obviously the mid boss, which your team has to kill most of the time later on when you group. And I like the little mechanic, like I said, where you could steal it, but the jungle doesn't feel too crazy, and the breakables around the map are cool, because the map is big, it's vertical too. There's some characters who could fly, there's some characters who could burrow, well, namely one who could burrow, but there's a lot of movement-based abilities with some of the characters. One of them is literally called Lash, and he flies around on a whip, so there's that. Vindicta literally flies around just in general. But there's a lot of movement, so there's a lot of verticality. You could go to the roofs, and there's little zip lines to help you up there and shit. But in general, if you go around the map and you break a lot of these items, they give you some decent ass buffs. They give you extra ammo. You can make your clip bigger. You could get health. You could get souls. You could get ability power. You could get fire rate. You get a lot of shit. So it's not like there's nothing to do. You could go exploring. You could go fighting. You could go farming. There's a lot of options. And again, the main thing I keep trying to hammer down is they give you different options of what to do and different styles to play if you don't want to just do one thing. Now that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how they balance it, and if you are kind of unchanging like me, if you only want to do one thing, which is lane, because I hate jungling. It really depends on the type of person you are, but overall, it's always good to have options. Now, the main thing, which I keep trying to get to, but I keep getting distracted, the laning and just the level of difficulty of the game. Like I said, some characters are easy, some characters are hard. The items, there's a bunch of them, but eventually you're going to learn all these things. Now it comes down to pure mechanical skill. Obviously, some characters are good, some characters are bad. There's going to be buffs and nerfs, there's going to be balance changes. Right now, the people who I think are great are Vindicta, Bebop, Wraith, and especially Seven. Seven's another one. Dear Lord. So, again, some of these people seem so unfair, it's like, holy shit. But these are things that are easily changed. But what's not changed is the core of the gameplay. This game, similar to probably Dota, is going to be feast or famine for new people. If you are not good at this game and you're playing against good people, you probably are going to get eaten alive, and here's the reason why. Similar, kind of, to Dota, your minions, when you kill the enemies and when they kill yours, not only do you get souls for just killing them, but afterward they also drop like a little soul ball that flies out of them, and you can either shoot that or just let it fly off to get the souls extra, or your enemy could choose to steal it from you. So this is where you can't really, you could deny your own from the enemy and you could deny them theirs. And this is where the level of skill expression kind of becomes kind of big. Already, I mentioned this before, but this is a very FPS centric and associated game where if you're good at aiming, you're going to be really good at this. Not many people, sadly me included, are that great at aiming. So sometimes you're going to struggle. And from what I've seen, again, maybe I really do need to play more, but I really feel like a lot of the balance goes really towards the weapon. There are some abilities that will chunk you, but they're mostly there to just do like some damage. There's not really a hardcore mage person or an ability centric person that most of their stuff does damage from that. Aside from maybe Seven and maybe McGinnis, who's a turret lady, and Seven's like a giant electric field guy. Aside from those two that I've seen, there's some people who do like damage over time. There's a lot of dot in the game too, a lot of different damage types. But overall, I feel like the items that just buff your gun will probably be the ones to kill you the quickest. I feel like the gun, and I don't know if this is intentional or not from Valve, we really got to see, but I feel like the gun is probably the most powerful thing. And some of the items for the yellow page, which mainly buff your auto attacks, your gun, some of those are fucking ridiculous. Again, not saying that abilities aren't powerful, but it really feels like the most powerful thing if you want to be a Slayer, you're going to use a gun. Those things wreck you, especially in later on in the game. It doesn't feel like there's tanks, it just feels like there's people who take slightly longer to kill. Another thing that's a little bit annoying is there's a lot of mobility. Again, there's a stamina system, there's a sprint system, and you can either use your stamina bar to sprint or to air dodge. And there is items to extend this and give you more, but especially in the early game, if people know what they're doing, I feel like it's extremely hard to catch someone out and actually lock them down for a kill unless they're stupid or unless you're really good. So the skill level of this game, again, it's really easy to try, and especially in beta when no one knows what they're doing, it feels nice. But in some of the games, I felt like when the enemy's really outskilling you, where they're stealing all your extra souls from your minions that you're killing, and they're confirming theirs, so you're not getting any extra. And they're just jungling, they're getting really ahead of you, and they can aim like crazy. Or I don't think there's any problem with hacking, but when the enemy kills me, they're always hacking. But essentially, the game feels like it could very easily be a very skill capped game with all of the systems in place. It's really fucking scary, and I don't think it's going to be that appealing. And obviously, there's going to be a whole bunch of skill groups, and matchmaking will hopefully help with this, depending on how popular the game is. But this is where I really fear for people who are not good at video games. I don't think this is going to be a casual game. And it really questions of, does it really need to exist? Because things like Dota exist. Now again, Dota's top down, but at this point Valve has two MOBAs, right? Granted, very different. This one's sort of I don't want to say like Overwatch, but it sort of is, but more MOBA style. But it's like at this point you have your choice, right, of Dota 2 and Deadlock. But they're both decently hard, so it's not like one's easier than the other. I would say probably Deadlock is probably a lot easier just in terms of gameplay and stuff. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to aim too well for some characters. Some characters have some setup where it makes it easy, and not every character is a gun character, although that's what I think is the best. But overall, with the laning, with the jungle, with just how MOBAs are in general, and with the way this game plays out, especially with it being an FPS, if you can aim, you're going to be right at home. If you can micromanage a lot of things, you're going to do great. But again, the main thing is the laning, it's tough sometimes, and then later on in the game, when shit hits the fan, it gets to be a little hard, and it feels just like there's nothing you could do to come back. Again, whether these things are intentional or not, who really knows? But overall, despite all these negatives, which are very fearful, it really just defines what type of players will really like this game. I think because Valve has their name on it, not only is there a certain amount of quality, like I said, but there's also a certain amount of interest where it's going to have players regardless. But it really just begs the question of, aside from it being third person and being a different style of FPS gameplay, which honestly I think is enough, will it do well competing with Dota? Because I feel like most of the serious people are on there, but Dota's been out for God knows how long, so maybe they want something new. Because it is a new game. It's fresh, and that's the main thing. It's not like there's completely novel things, although there's a lot of other things I haven't seen other MOBAs do, like the item system, the sprint system, and everything. As far as I know, they kind of are cornering the market with an FPS style MOBA. Because Smite is, as far as I could know, or as far as I could tell and know, the most successful thing that's closest, even though it's not an FPS, it's third person. And again, you have games like Predecessor, which are kind of the same thing, but I don't think Predecessor is going to have the pull that Deadlock does, especially because it's Valve. But that's pretty much my opinions on the game. It's fun, it's good. The characters are a mixed bag of good for beginners, good for advanced people as well. It seems like the game can only really go up from here, and this is why I was again scared to say this because I don't want to seem like IGN, but because it's really early on. But my initial impressions are this is a very, very exciting game to follow. The gameplay is good. I don't think it's too casual, which is fine for some people. But maybe it'll be fine for casuals too, because when there's a lot of people suck ass, let's be real. So, overall, it's a nice, fun, new game, and I think it's going to corner the market because I don't think anyone else has really done a third-person MOBA this well and this unique. It's decently unique, again, really early on, so we don't know where the game's going to go, but I'm excited for the monetization, so I can make some money, hopefully. I'm excited for the progression. Excuse me. I'm just not excited for how much of a sweat fest this game could really be, because that's the big concern. As a now old man at the ripe age of 26, I don't know how much my brain can handle doing all this shit, because I already do it so much on Fortnite. But overall, it's really good. If I had to give it a rating for right now, and I swear to God, I'm really not IGN, I swear, because IGN is crazy. But if I had to give it a rating, that obviously will change over time, but again, I only see it getting higher. At this point in time, I cannot see the game being lower, absolutely lower than a 7. At the very least, this game is a 7. I want to boost it to a 7.5 or an 8, but again, we got to see where the direction of the game goes and if they keep up the momentum. But as an early access and hopefully almost entirely guaranteed free-to-play game with hopefully fair monetization options that aren't pay to win, I think this game has great fucking potential. It's fun to play the characters, and again, there's enough of a mixed bag, and the way the systems are in the game where, aside from it being a little hard, it gives you options and it feels good to explore and try new things. The main reason why I'm playing the game, other than like, it's fun, there's a lot of games that are fun, but it fits my niche because there's a lot of characters that do what I like. Aside from the mage items maybe feeling a little like not kill secure enough, because you really got to rely on your basic, on your weapon. Which again, I think that's intentional. They want you to be able to use your weapon and it be relevant. But aside from that, I think that there's enough of a variety of characters, and they're only going to add more to where the game is again just really looking good for the future. So at the bare minimum lowest, I don't see it being a below a 7. It can only go up. Now, the one other thing I forgot to mention, which kind of adds another level of complexity, is there is melee in the game. So because it's an FPS, right? It's third person. Well, FPS means first person, but it's a third person shooter. I've been saying that the whole time. There is melee and there is a counter system, but that's just another level of what you can do. And there's actually a little advanced tech here where when the minions are low, you can melee them and you can auto guarantee the soul so the enemy can't pick it up. But I don't know if it's just not being used because people are ignoring it, people don't know about it, but many people don't use melee because there's a big charge up to it. There's a light attack and a heavy attack, and you can actually counter the heavy. And there is items to help you with melee, but unless the other person's stupid, 9 times out of 10 they will parry the heavy melee and you'll just get stunned and you'll get fucked. So I feel like melee is good for the minions, but in terms of actual combat, aside from maybe some cheeky items and some cheeky flanks you could do, melee is just kind of in a weird spot that I don't think is that good. But aside from that, that's pretty much the game. Standard, well, not standard, but standard with a twist is the best way to describe it. At least a 7 out of 10. Really fun, really good. If you have the chance, I think you should try it. And very excited for the future. Either way, that's going to be about it. Please tell me if you've played Deadlock and how you're enjoying it, what your concerns are, and what you think. Because this game is really, I don't know how receptive they're going to be to opinions, but it really could go to the moon. I could see this being a great contender, not only to Dota, its sister rival, but to other games too. It'll really shake some things up because I think people really like third person, and a lot of people need to get used to overhead. Which, if this can solve that issue, if it could just be a good third person MOBA shooter, then it could take a lot of fucking people. Like, it could take people away from other stuff too. But either way, that's about it. I hope everyone enjoyed. Please tell me what you think in the comments, and watch me at Twitch TV/Tecnics channel.